Welcome to Kubrick Quest Episode 5. Today we'll be talking about Stanley Kubrick's fifth feature film, the 1960 historical epic drama adventure Spartacus starring Kirk Douglas. Like most of Kubrick's movies, this was based on a book, and that book was also called Spartacus, written by Howard Fass, which came out in 1951. Spartacus is a pretty cool movie. It's pretty good. It won a bunch of awards when it came out. In fact, it won, what does it say down there? 4. It won 4 Academy Awards. Well, that's pretty cool. And it was selected to be in the Library of Congress's National Film Registry for being, what they call it, culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. So it will be preserved forever. Keep in mind, this series is called Kubrick Quest, so I'm not just judging it based on the film itself, but how it fits into Stanley Kubrick's filmography. That being said, this is, I'd say, the least Kubrick of Kubrick's films. It looks and feels a lot different than his other ones. Like, for example, if someone asked, hey, I've never seen a Stanley Kubrick movie before, can you recommend me one? 9 out of 10 people would probably not recommend this one. It's a good movie. It's fun to watch. You know, it's not like Clockwork Orange or anything like that. So just taking this as a film from a non-Kubrick perspective, this is one of the best of those 1950s, 1960s, big historical epic sword and sandal drama movies. You know, the phrase, they don't really make them like they used to, it really applies to Spartacus and other movies of this era. Those big sword and sandal 3-hour plus movies like Exodus, Ben-Hur, El Cid, Cleopatra, which I haven't seen yet, but it's on my HBO list, The Fall of the Roman Empire. You know, and this really comes from a different era when it was an event to go to the movies. Like, come on, Marcia, grab the kids. We're going to go see the new 5-hour epic. Lots of pictures on the big glowing rectangle. No one talked like that. But these movies were very long, and they had intermissions in the middle of them. Speaking of intermissions, the version I was watching actually did still have the intermission in the movie. Like, you're watching a movie at home, not in the theater, and just like in the middle, there's the section, it just stops and some music plays and says intermission. It's one of those kind of movies. And, you know, it's funny, I actually wanted to test the timing of the intermission to see maybe it's the same time as when it was released in the theater. So I got up, got myself a quick drink, I went to the bathroom really quick, and I came back. But by the time I came back, the movie was already playing. So, you know, I don't think I took abnormally long to do what I had to do, because that's what the intermission is supposed to be for, right? It's a little break in the middle of this long thing so you can go get a drink and freshen up and then come back to your seat, and it should still be paused, hopefully. But no, when I came back, it was going. So I don't know. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this movie's backstory and production. Stanley Kubrick was not originally the one supposed to be directing this movie. That was supposed to be Anthony Mann, a veteran director who made a lot of westerns already. However, just 1 week into shooting this movie, Kirk Douglas, the star of this movie, fired Anthony Mann. Kirk Douglas said Anthony Mann was intimidated by the scope of this picture, and that's why he fired him. Although, shortly after, Anthony Mann would then go on to direct one of the previously mentioned big historical epic movies called El Cid. So, who knows, maybe it was just a clash of personalities between Kirk Douglas and Anthony Mann. Probably. Either way, they needed a new director, so Kirk Douglas turned to Stanley Kubrick because the two had previously worked together on what we covered in the last Kubrick Quest episode, Paths of Glory. Because Anthony Mann was fired a week into production and they had already shot the opening quarry scenes where Spartacus was on that chain gang, this meant that the first 10 minutes of the movie or so were already shot and done, which basically set the tone and look and feel that Stanley Kubrick had to then work within. Probably the biggest reason that this is, like I said, the least Kubrick of Kubrick's movies is that he had the least amount of full creative control. From what I've learned and read so far while making these Kubrick Quest episodes, is that Stanley Kubrick seems to be one of those really super dominant creative personalities where he'll make really great stuff, but you just have to let him work his way. You know, like if he was in preschool, he would get labeled doesn't play well with others. Stanley Kubrick often fought with the studio backing this movie. After he took over production, he wanted to continue at a very methodical pace of 2 camera setups per day, to which the studio responded, "No way, man, that's too slow. How about 32 camera setups per day?" To which Stanley Kubrick responded, "No way, man, that's too much." And then they met somewhere in the middle, and it was 8 camera setups per day they agreed upon. I think that's exactly how the conversation went down. Kubrick also fought with the cinematographer Russell Meddy, who is also a cinematographer on The Omega Man, by the way, who complained about Kubrick's excessively detailed camera work. On one occasion, Russell Meddy threatened to quit, to which Kubrick responded, "You can do your job by sitting in your chair and shutting up. I'll be the director of photography." Sounds like a very easy to work with guy, you know? Kubrick also fought frequently with the movie's screenwriter, Dalton Trumbo. One of Kubrick's main complaints to Trumbo is that the main guy, Spartacus, didn't really have any little quirks or character flaws, which I kind of agree with him on. Kubrick also fought frequently with the movie's star, Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas lived a very long life, and when he turned 100, he was interviewed about his long career, and some of the remarks he had about Stanley Kubrick, looking back all those years, he said, "Kubrick, he was a bastard, but he was one talented guy. Difficult? He invented the word, so we had a lot of fights, but I always appreciated his talent." Kirk Douglas admitted that one day on set he got so mad that he picked up a folding chair from the set and threatened to smash Kubrick to bits with it if he didn't restore Douglas's close-up shots in the end where Spartacus is being crucified. In the end, of course, there were a lot of big dramatic close-ups of Kirk Douglas hanging on that cross, so I guess he really didn't bonk Kubrick on the head with that chair. Between the often turbulent production and lack of complete creative control that he wanted, Kubrick would later distance himself from this movie and basically disown it when talking about his body of work. Despite all this, Spartacus went on to become the biggest box office success of 1960 and grossed $60 million. I'd like to talk about the screenplay of this movie just for a minute. Although it's not specifically about Stanley Kubrick, it is an interesting enough story and it had some real-world implications. The screenplay for this movie was written by a guy named Dalton Trumbo. If you don't know who Dalton Trumbo is, the quick one-sentence summary for him is that he was a very popular and successful Hollywood screenwriter back in his time, and he was accused of being a communist sympathizer and was then thrown in jail. When Trumbo was in jail, he was not supposed to be writing screenplays for movies anymore, but he defied the law and continued to write screenplays using fake names because he had to support himself and his family and his career and all that. All the details of Dalton Trumbo's story is a whole other thing that I'm not going to completely get into right now, but if you're interested, then go check out the 2015 movie called Trumbo, starring Bryan Cranston.
Kirk. Dalton.
What's the title?
Spartacus.
The Bryan Cranston Trumbo movie is actually a good little supplemental bonus viewing for the Spartacus movie because the last third, like the last 25 minutes of that, they go into when Trumbo was writing this movie right here.
And I just got the script.
Sure. There must be 7 hours of entertainment there.
Not a single page is entertaining.
And all the legal and political drama surrounding that, and you even get some scenes where I forget the actor's name, but they dress him up to look exactly like Kirk Douglas, and they do a good job, and they have some good little comments about Kubrick in that movie.
But I've never had a director who's a bigger pain in my ass than Stanley Kubrick.
The reason I bring all this up about the screenplay is that the author Howard Fast, who wrote the original novel that Spartacus was based on, like Dalton Trumbo, was also thrown in jail for refusing to name names to the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC, as they were known. He refused to name names to the HUAC investigators. He wrote Spartacus while in prison. Considering all this, it really gives the big, famous, I'm Spartacus, it really gives that scene a big political undertone by not only showing the loyalty of Spartacus's army to Spartacus and his cause, but also by commenting on Howard Fast's solidarity with the other communist sympathizers who were being blasted by the HUAC committee in Hollywood at that time. Also, interestingly, Kirk Douglas publicly announced that Dalton Trumbo was the screenwriter for Spartacus, which was a big deal at the time because he was blacklisted and was not supposed to be working in Hollywood.
The press release will say the screenplay for Spartacus was written by Dalton Trumbo.
Kirk, if you don't get rid of Trumbo, I will.
And right after I quit, you can reshoot all my scenes. For better or worse, I am Spartacus.
This announcement caused a whole bunch of groups who were in favor of the Hollywood blacklisting to protest this movie, writing it off as communist propaganda or something like that. Despite all this, President JFK himself actually defied all the protests and complaints against this movie and saw the movie and enjoyed it and let everyone know. And the president's support for this actually helped end the whole Hollywood blacklisting era. Location-wise, this movie was mainly shot between parts of California and Spain, because both of those look exactly like ancient Rome. To help create the illusion of really large crowds that play such a big role in this movie, Kubrick's crew used 3-channel sound equipment to record 76,000 spectators at a Michigan State Notre Dame college football game, and they were told to shout, "Hail Crassus" and "I'm Spartacus." If you thought the battle scenes in Paths of Glory had a lot of extras in them, well, wait till you see Spartacus, because it used about 8,000 trained soldiers from the Spanish infantry to act as the Roman army. To properly work with such a large number of cast, crew, and extras, Stanley Kubrick directed the big battle scenes from the top of specially constructed towers. Those look pretty cool. When working on the movie's post-production, they initially had to cut a number of the movie's more bloody and brutal battle scenes because they tested poorly with audiences, which I guess just shows how times have changed, because when I was watching this, one of my thoughts was that I really felt this could have been improved by more blood and gore and violence, but maybe it's just my own personal taste. Obviously, there's a lot of action and fighting in the movie, but the actual violence and blood and gore is kept to a minimum. It's used sparingly, but when it is, it does have an effect. For example, there's this big battle scene in the movie, and at one point, Spartacus just straight chops this guy's arm right off. And considering how the rest of the movie is pretty tame in terms of violence, that caught me so off guard. I was like, oh my God, I had to watch it like 5 times. So here's some of my thoughts and notes I jotted down while watching this movie for the first time. Spartacus in this movie, played by Kirk Douglas, is basically just Colonel Dax from Paths of Glory, just transported 2,000 years in the past. They feel a lot like the same character. They're both like these noble guys fighting for their cause against a big oppressive power. I really liked the rebellion scene where Spartacus led all the other slaves who were kept at the school where they're being trained to be gladiators. That was such a brutal scene. Spartacus is a savage beast. It's especially shown here where he growls like a tiger or something and then drowns this guy in a bowl of soup. I like how sometimes in this movie there's real world locations with thousands of extras, and it's real and it looks great. And then the very next shot could be the scene where it's such an obvious fake backdrop with a matte painting behind it. This one character, I would have made him a lot dorkier because he said he got by based on his entertainment abilities. You know, he was a singer, he was a juggler, he did magic tricks, but he still looks just buff and just like any of the other fighters in Spartacus's army. There were some parts in this movie, especially the big battle scenes, where we had just like 5-minute plus sequences of people walking around, getting in formation, which I get it. The scale of it is cool to watch, but like, I don't have the patience just to watch people getting in formation for 5 minutes. In this one scene in the bathhouse, these guys are talking and you hear background music and you think it's just part of the soundtrack, but I like how they have actual musicians walking around the bathhouse playing the music. Towards the end of the movie, when the two opposing sides were gearing up for a big battle and their leaders were giving their pep talks, their strategies, I really like the editing back and forth between Spartacus and the Roman general. I thought that was a really cool touch. The flaming logs that Spartacus's army used are pretty cool. Wouldn't want to get hit by those.
It's long, long, it's big, it's heavy, it's wood. It's long, long, it's better than that.
This feels like one of those classic underdog stories. Like, I can see how The Patriot or Braveheart would have taken inspiration from this.
But there's a good story in there, somewhere, about one man who tried to take on the whole world.
It's cool to see the actual star of the movie, Kirk Douglas himself, riding the horses around, swinging the sword, so you know it's not a stunt double. As expected, the big iconic I'm Spartacus scene was very effective and very powerful. Spartacus spitting in the Roman leader's face was pretty badass. I like that. As far as movie climaxes go, this ending was dramatic. Man, I loved it. It was fun.
I won't let them crucify you.
One strategic thing I don't get from Spartacus was like, if they've made it this far, they're captured, they know they're going to be killed, why not go out just fighting the Roman general? Yeah, they all know they're going to die, and they're surrounded by the other Romans, and Spartacus and his number 2 are told to fight to the death, and one's going to die there, and the winner will be crucified. It's kind of damned if you don't situation. Why not use their last ounces of life, just go and quickly stab the Roman general who's been after you this whole movie? You're going to die anyway. You know, why not? He's right there. Come on. In the end, I like how even though, whoops, spoiler, Spartacus dies, he kind of did achieve his goal because his son was born a free man, not a slave like he was.
This is your son. He's free, Spartacus.
There were some great quotes in this movie, like,
"You smell like a rhinoceros."
"You smell like a rhinoceros." It's a good one.
His teeth are the best thing about him.
Slaves to them were not people, they were like livestock, so you just check their health by the status of their teeth, I guess.
I like you. I want you to be my friend. I want to be your friend. What's your name, slave?
What's your name, slave? That's another good one here.
I'm not after glory. I'm after Spartacus.
Real quick before we close out, here's some random fun thoughts I had about this movie while I was watching it for the first time. First off, why do all the Romans have British accents? Shouldn't they have Italian accents? They should all sound like Paulie Walnuts. Hey, this Spartacus guy. The fuck's his problem? When I was researching for this movie, I found this funny little story. It took forever to get Kirk Douglas up on that cross at the end of the movie, so they played a terrible joke. And as soon as he was safely installed on the cross, the assistant director then said, okay, lunch break, and everyone just left Kirk Douglas hanging there, which I thought that was hilarious. In the beginning of this movie, I thought the slave driver gave a really wimpy whip. I mean, look at that. Come on, put some elbow into it. I like how at the gladiator school, they say they give them the little garbage bag tie man bun of honor thing to be a gladiator.
You'll be given your ceremonial cow does, Marcellus Smith. There. Be proud of them.
I know there's cultural and historical reasons for that. It just looks dumb to me. The training gear at Spartacus's gladiator school is horrific. Look at that thing. I also love the scene where the instructor is painting Spartacus's different sections with different colors to show people where to strike during a sword fight. And I could see this being taken over the top in like a Zucker Brothers sketch, in like a Leslie Nielsen movie or something. I also love when Spartacus is fighting and then there's a tiny net. And we all know what they say about tiny nets.
Yes, a tiny net is a death sentence. It's a net and it's tiny.
The little kid in the camp here is like, oh no, I got milk in my eye. At this shot in this movie, that guy has a bubble on his foot. I don't know what that is. Kirk Douglas's chin dimple is a mathematically perfect circle. So, in conclusion, would I recommend this movie? Yeah. Yes, I would. If you're looking for a classic Hollywood sword and sandal, big epic drama adventure movies, then this is one of the better ones from that era. However, if you're looking for the most Stanley Kubrick movie with his Kubrickian style and visual experimentation, then no, this is not like those other Kubrick movies like Space Odyssey and Eyes Wide Shut and Clockwork Orange. It just looks and feels different than those. On this movie, Kubrick was more or less a director for hire than this being a fully fledged Stanley Kubrick production. Again, I'm not saying this is a bad movie at all. I think you should go check it out because it really is the best of one of those movies from a different era when they had these big 4-hour-long sword and sandal adventure movies with intermissions in the middle. You don't see those anymore. However, if you were to ask a bunch of people what are your top 3 Stanley Kubrick movies, I don't think most would put this in the top 3. Well, that is all for today. If you made it this far, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I will see you next time on Kubrick Quest. Goodbye.